My mother-in-law once told my husband that he should leave me. Her exact words, "She's just not good enough for this family." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I smiled and walked away. By the time she learned the truth, that everything she had ever schemed for was already under my name, it was far too late. The moment she destroyed her own son's future didn't come with drama. It arrived draped in pearls and poured into a glass of high-end champagne. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, sunlight spilling through the kitchen windows as I cleared away plates from our usual family brunch. That's when she approached me, her tone low and syrupy, laced with that familiar counterfeit affection she had mastered over the years. "Ava, dear," she began in a voice meant to mimic concern, "let's not stretch this out. You need to leave my son." I froze mid-motion. The silverware in my hands suddenly felt like weights. Across the room, Ethan, my husband, laughed with his father, completely unaware of the verbal grenade his mother had just lobbed into our kitchen. "You've had your fun," she continued, casually adjusting a diamond bracelet on her wrist. "But surely, even you can see it, you're not the right match for this family. You've never been." Her message wasn't new. I had endured years of passive-aggressive remarks, thinly veiled barbs about my modest upbringing, her refusal to introduce me as anything more than Ethan's wife, always skipping my name as if it lacked importance. But today, she wasn't hiding her disdain behind polished words. Today, she was playing her hand openly. "You don't come from the right background," she said, her voice as smooth as satin but sharp underneath. "No legacy. No high-profile relatives. No circles of influence. A woman like you can only drag a man like Ethan down." I took a deep breath and carefully placed the plates on the counter, my face unreadable. She took my silence as surrender. "Don't look so shocked," she went on, the corners of her mouth lifting into a smug little smile. "Ethan will find someone else. Someone more appropriate. A woman with the right pedigree. Someone who belongs." Now it was clear. This wasn't just an insult, it was an eviction notice. She was ready to cut me out of her son's life like a blemish on an otherwise perfect portrait. And she expected me to fold, to crumble, to crawl away in shame while she selected a new, better wife for Ethan. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled, not the kind of smile that surrenders, but the kind that should have made her stomach turn. "I understand perfectly," I said. Then I walked away without another word, leaving her puzzled, uncertain why her verbal dagger hadn't pierced. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the home she liked to parade through as if it were her own personal stage, it wasn't Ethan's. And it definitely wasn't hers. That marble-countered, floor-to-ceiling windowed mansion? I bought it long before I ever became Ethan's wife. My name was the only one on the deed. As for the successful business she always mocked, calling it my little side project, it had quietly grown to overshadow Ethan's entire career. His paycheck wouldn't even cover the property taxes on our estate. The money she so enjoyed, the lavish gifts, the first-class vacations, the constant indulgences, had never come from her family's supposed generational wealth. It came from me. Every cent. Every brick. Every luxury. Built from nothing. By me. That same evening, I didn't bother telling Ethan about the little talk his mother and I had. I didn't need to. She was already standing on a trapdoor she couldn't see. Over the next few weeks, Vivian, my mother-in-law, became increasingly aggressive. She began planting seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind, cloaking her words in concern. "Ava doesn't really understand our lifestyle, sweetheart," she told him with an affected sigh. "Wouldn't you be happier with someone who just fits? Of course, it's not her fault. She was raised differently. But let's be honest about what's best for you." Ethan, ever the optimist, simply laughed off her comments, completely unaware that his mother's meddling was turning into a full-blown campaign. Then came the final move. One evening, I stood just outside the study door and overheard their conversation. Vivian's voice was low and urgent. She's not right for you, Ethan. You've given her enough. It's time to move on. Then, the real kicker. If you divorce her now, I'll make sure you walk away with everything. I almost laughed. She thought she held leverage. She thought the power in this family flowed through her. She had no idea. That night, as I lay beside Ethan, who had no idea his own mother had launched a quiet war against our marriage, I wasn't angry. Not even disappointed. I was amused. Because in truth, they had already lost. They just didn't know it yet. The first tremor in Ethan's carefully constructed reality arrived the next morning at breakfast. I sat across from him, sipping my coffee, watching as he scrolled through his phone without a care in the world. "You're quiet today," he noted, glancing up. "Everything okay?" I smiled. Everything's perfect. And it was. Because the decision had been made. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I wouldn't waste energy trying to defend myself. I would let them win, or rather, let them believe they had. Because what's more satisfying than victory? Letting your enemy walk into defeat with a smile on their face. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Vivian. "Ethan and I had a lovely lunch today. He agrees. It's time to move forward." Time to move forward? How cute. She actually thought she was in control. I didn't reply. Not right away. I let the message sit. I wanted her to feel triumphant. Untouchable. 2 hours later came another. "I hope you understand, Ava. This is what's best for everyone." I let out a quiet chuckle. Best for everyone? No, Vivian. It was best only for you. Still, I stayed in character. "I understand perfectly." I could almost hear the gasp of satisfaction as she read my reply. In my mind's eye, I pictured her calling up her friends, gloating about how gracefully I had stepped aside. "She handled it so well," she'd say. She finally realized she didn't belong. Oh, Vivian. She truly had no idea. Later that evening, Ethan walked in later than usual. He paused in the doorway, clearly uneasy. Good. He should be. "Hey, babe," he said hesitantly. "Can we talk?" Of course, I answered calmly, settling onto the couch. He joined me, his hands rubbing together, a nervous habit I had seen countless times. He was predictable. "I think we should separate," he finally said, his voice low but steady. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to give his words some weight, though they were nothing I hadn't heard before. "Oh! And why is that?" I asked, keeping my tone mild. "It's just, we want different things," he added, using the same tired script that cowards, liars, and unfaithful men had recycled for centuries. "We?" I asked, not because I didn't understand, but simply to see the flicker of unease in his expression. He wasn't ready for my calm. He'd likely prepared for tears, yelling, maybe even begging. What he got instead was a serene smile. "If that's truly what you want, Ethan," I replied smoothly. He blinked, confused. "Wait, you're not upset?" "Why would I be?" I asked, watching him closely as he tried to read my face. "You don't want to fight for our marriage?" "Should I?" I asked, rising to my feet. "It sounds like your mind's already made up." Without another word, I walked into our bedroom, pulled out a suitcase, and laid it open on the bed. "I'll give you some space," I said, unhurriedly folding clothes into the case. "I'll stay somewhere else for a while." The stunned look on his face was worth savoring. "Ava, wait. I didn't mean you had to leave tonight. I just meant." But I was already packing. Let him believe I was devastated. Let him think I was leaving because my heart was broken. Let him cling to the illusion that he had control. In truth, I was leaving, yes, but on my terms. I was placing him exactly where his mother had wanted him, alone, untethered, and free. But what neither of them realized was that this so-called freedom was about to cost them everything. That night, I checked into a luxurious hotel, the same one Vivian had once flaunted as the venue for her high society charity galas. The irony tasted better than the champagne I ordered to my suite. I sat by the window, gazing out over the glittering city skyline, wrapped in peace. Tomorrow, Vivian would wake up certain that she had finally won. Ethan would believe he had shed his burden. But by the time either of them discovered what they had truly given up, it would be far too late. I pictured Vivian, smug and victorious, sipping her imported roast coffee in that over-decorated dining room of hers. In her mind, she had removed the unworthy woman from her son's life and was already plotting his next, more suitable marriage, someone with a pedigree, someone she could mold and manipulate. And me? I was supposed to be shattered, humiliated, forgotten, a quiet warning to any woman who dared rise above her station. I smiled. She had no clue. No clue that her world, which seemed so perfect in that moment, was about to collapse. Ethan's wake-up call arrived around 10 o'clock the next morning. "Ava, we need to talk. Something's wrong with the house." I didn't respond. By noon, another message came through. "Why is the bank saying my name isn't on the mortgage? Call me." There it was. It had taken less than 24 hours for the truth to begin unraveling. Still, I remained silent. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, my lawyer sent me a short message. He called. "He's realizing the truth. Let me know when you want to reply." "Not yet," I texted back. Let him stew. That evening, it was Vivian's turn. I was just finishing dinner in my suite when my lawyer forwarded another update. "Vivian just called. She's furious. Claims there's been a mistake." I could almost hear her screeching voice through the phone. "What do you mean my son's name isn't on the house?" She probably blamed clerical errors or faulty paperwork. Because in her mind, everything Ethan had was rightfully his, no, hers. But none of it was. Not the house. Not the investments. Not the business she had once dismissed with a scoff. I raised my wine glass and took another slow sip. She would soon realize the real mistake was underestimating me. By the time they both demanded answers, I was ready. We met at the house, their house, as they used to call it. Vivian once adored calling it the family estate. Ethan was already pacing in the driveway, arms crossed tight across his chest. Vivian stood beside him, her carefully polished facade starting to crack. "Ava," Ethan said, as I stepped out of the car, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, my steps slow and intentional. "Yes," Vivian cut in sharply. "There's been a mistake. The bank says this house is in your name." "That's not a mistake," I replied without pause. They both stared in silence. Vivian's lips parted in disbelief, while Ethan looked utterly lost. "But that doesn't make sense," he finally muttered. I thought. "You thought what?" I asked, tilting my head. "That I owned this house. That we owned it." I let the pause settle between us before answering. "Ethan, this house was never yours." Vivian's face turned pale. "No," she stammered. No. That can't be." "It can." "And it is," I said, voice calm. Ethan shook his head. "But we lived here together." "And I let you," I said simply. For a second, there was silence. Then Vivian did what she always did when she didn't get her way. She lashed out. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "You were nothing without my son. You had nothing before him." "I had everything," I replied, not raising my voice, "and I still do." Ethan exhaled heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. The pieces were finally clicking into place. "Ava," he said quietly, "let's just talk. Maybe we can work something out." I smiled, slow and light. "Oh, Ethan," I said gently, "we already did." "That's why you signed a prenup." Vivian gasped. Ethan went still. And in that moment, I watched their world fall apart. I turned to leave, but not before delivering one final truth. "You wanted to be free of me?" I said, pausing just long enough to meet Ethan's eyes. "Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted." And with that, I walked away, leaving them behind, standing speechless on land they now realized was never theirs. Too late, they understood they had played a losing hand. Vivian remained rooted to the spot, her picture-perfect world crumbling around her. Ethan, meanwhile, looked completely unmoored, his face pale, his lips parted in disbelief, struggling to grasp what had just happened. "Ava, we can fix this," he finally managed. A laugh almost slipped out. "Fix it? Fix what?" I asked, my voice sharp but calm. "Your mother's little plot? The way you stood by and let it happen? Or the fact that you assumed you could walk away with everything I worked for?" Vivian took a step forward, seething with rage. "You tricked him," she hissed. "You manipulated my son into signing that prenup." I cocked my head slightly, letting her words hang between us. "Tricked?" I echoed. "You mean the prenup that Ethan signed without hesitation? The one that legally secures my business, my assets, and my home?" Ethan looked like he wanted to interject, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Tell me, Ethan," I asked, "did you even read the prenup? Or, like your mother, did you assume it would never actually matter?" His silence answered for him. Vivian's breath came in short, angry bursts. She wasn't just enraged, she was unraveling. "This isn't right," she spat. "You're being spiteful. You're destroying this family out of pure vindictiveness." "Am I?" I said, silk in my tone. "Or are you just furious that your little scheme didn't end the way you had envisioned?" Vivian's face flushed a dark crimson. "You were never good enough for this family," she snapped. I stepped forward, staring her down. "And yet," I said softly, "it's still my name on the deed." The air between us felt like it might crack. For the first time in her life, Vivian had no power, and it terrified her. I turned to walk away again, but Ethan reached out and caught my wrist, his grip light, but pleading. "Ava, please." I looked down at his hand. A year ago, that simple touch would have melted me. Now it felt hollow, just a desperate grasp from a man sinking in the mess he had helped create. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. I messed up. I let my mom get in my head. But we can fix this." I studied him. The man I had once chosen, the man I had built dreams with. But that man was gone if he had ever truly existed. "You don't get to play the victim now, Ethan," I said, steady and unmoved. "Not after everything. Not after you picked her over me." He swallowed, visibly shaken. "I was an idiot," he admitted. "Yes," I said without hesitation, "you were." He flinched, and Vivian made a noise of offense, clearly shocked I'd speak so bluntly to her son. I ignored her entirely. "You and your mother wanted me gone," I continued. "So I gave you exactly what you asked for. Tell me, Ethan, why aren't you happy?" He looked away, his face clouded with shame. But I didn't need his answer. I already knew. "You think this is finished?" Vivian burst out, her voice cracking. I turned to her slowly. "It is finished," I said. "You just can't stand that you didn't get to write the ending." "This house was meant for Ethan," she cried. "But it never was," I said. "And neither was anything else you believed belonged to you." Vivian was trembling now, the full weight of reality crashing over her. She had spent years believing she was untouchable, that she could twist people, manipulate outcomes, and always emerge victorious. But standing there in the driveway of a house she didn't own, facing a future she couldn't control, she finally saw it clearly. She hadn't just lost. She'd never been in control to begin with. I didn't stay to hear her next excuse or frantic denial. I didn't need to. As I walked toward my car, I felt something wash over me, something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Because I wasn't just leaving Ethan. I wasn't just escaping Vivian. I was walking away from all of it, the quiet condescension, the subtle manipulations, the constant pressure to prove I belonged. I was finally free. And they were stuck. Ethan, bound to the consequences of his cowardice. Vivian, powerless inside the empire she had tried and failed to steal. And me? I was only just getting started. But Vivian was never the type to accept defeat in silence. 2 days after I walked out of their lives, I got a message, not from Ethan, but from her. "You may have the house," she wrote, "but don't think for a second that you've won. My son will recover. He'll find someone better. Someone who actually belongs in this family. Enjoy your lonely little empire while it lasts." I read it with a smile. Oh, Vivian. Still clinging to her illusions. Still convinced that Ethan had something to bounce back from. Still deluded enough to think I had lost anything at all. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I didn't reply. I had no reason to. But life, as it tends to, handled the rest for me. 1 week later, I heard from a mutual friend, one of the few who had stayed neutral through the entire storm. "You won't believe what just happened," the message read. I sipped my coffee, amused. "Try me." Ethan lost his job. That got my attention. How? Apparently, Vivian had marched into his boss's office, demanding a promotion for her son, claiming he deserved it after all he'd been through. I nearly choked laughing. Of course she did. Vivian wasn't just controlling, she was delusional. She had spent her entire life believing that Ethan was entitled to success. Vivian had always believed that Ethan's name alone would open doors, that his last name should carry weight. But the corporate world doesn't reward arrogance, it punishes it. What did his boss do? I asked when the friend paused. Not only did they refuse the promotion, she said, but HR started investigating his record. Turns out Ethan was already on thin ice due to underperformance. Vivian's dramatic outburst in the office just sealed the deal. They fired him. I let out a slow breath. Ethan had lost his home. He had lost his security. And now he had lost his job. Not because of me. Because of her. Vivian had spent her life shielding him from consequences, covering his mistakes, justifying his failures, keeping him cocooned in delusions of grandeur. But this time, her meddling hadn't saved him. It had destroyed him. And I hadn't even finished watching the unraveling. 2 days later, Ethan called. I let it ring. I wasn't in the mood to entertain apologies. Then a message came through. "Ava, please. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, weighing my options. I didn't owe him a single second of my time. But curiosity tugged at me. So I answered. "Ethan," I said simply. He exhaled, relieved. "CL, Ava," he stammered. I messed up. I know that. I don't know what to do anymore." I leaned back and let silence fill the space between us. "What do you want me to say, Ethan?" I asked at last. "I didn't think it would end like this," he admitted. "I thought," he trailed off. "You thought your mother was right," I finished for him. He paused, then quietly replied, "Yeah." And there it was, the truth, finally spoken. Ethan had chosen to believe in his mother's vision over reality. Over logic. Over me. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, voice thin. "But you did," I replied without hesitation. Another silence. "Can we meet?" he asked. I closed my eyes. There it was, the last attempt to reel me back in. But I knew better now. He didn't want me. He wanted safety. He wanted the life he had thrown away. And I no longer made a habit of rescuing men from their own egos. "No, Ethan," I said gently but firmly. "There's nothing left to say." For the first time, I heard real panic in his voice. "Ava, wait." "Goodbye, Ethan," I said, and ended the call. I thought that would be the last of it, but Vivian still had one last humiliation in her. 2 days later, she barged into my office unannounced. My receptionist tried to stop her, but she stormed past like she still had authority in my life. "This is your fault," she shouted, slamming her hands on my desk. I stayed seated, entirely unbothered. "What exactly is my fault?" I asked coolly. "You ruined my son's life," she accused. "You took everything from him, the house, the stability." "No, Vivian," I cut in, calm but razor-sharp. "I didn't take anything. Ethan gave it all away." She blinked. "Excuse me." I leaned forward. "Ethan chose to trust you. He chose to believe I was expendable. He chose to walk out." I let that truth sink in before continuing. "But tell me something, Vivian. When you urged him to leave me, when you promised him something better, did it ever cross your mind? What if you were wrong?" Her face paled. She opened her mouth to respond, but I stopped her again. "You didn't," I said softly. You never thought that far. I stood slowly. And now, I added, you have to live with that. Vivian's lips parted, but no words came. Because deep down, she knew. I had never been the problem. She had. She had raised a man who couldn't stand on his own. She had taught him that entitlement was a strength. And in the end, it was her arrogance that undid them both. She took a stumbling step backward. She looked older. Smaller. Get out of my office, Vivian, I said calmly. She paused, one last flicker of defiance in her eyes. But there was no power left in her. She left. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled, a long, satisfied breath. The storm had passed, and I was still standing. After that day, I never heard from Vivian again, nor from Ethan. The silence that followed was the loudest relief I had ever known. No more manipulations. No more self-doubt. No more trying to earn a seat at a table I never belonged at. I hadn't just won. I had grown. The first morning I felt truly free. I woke up to the sound of nothing. No tension in the air. No passive-aggressive messages. No forced pleasantries. Just peace. And yet, life kept moving. My business flourished. My team expanded. My confidence? Unshakable. Funny, isn't it? Vivian had spent years trying to convince me I wasn't enough. That I needed Ethan to succeed. That my wins were tied to him. But now, while they fumbled to rebuild what they had broken, I was too busy building something greater. Months went by. I occasionally heard rumors of Ethan's continued downfall. He tried to restart, to prove he could rise from the ashes, but without me, he floundered. Employers didn't care who his mother was. The women he dated didn't want a man who had lost everything. And Vivian, her meddling had become legendary. No one wanted anything to do with her. One afternoon, a former colleague of Ethan's dropped by my flagship boutique. You really dodged a bullet, she said. Ethan, well, let's just say he's not doing well. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. I already knew. He had been handed everything, and he squandered it. I had built everything, and I was far from finished. On the 1-year anniversary of my new life, I hosted a quiet gathering at my boutique. Not to gloat, not for revenge, but to celebrate the journey. I had spent too long trying to be enough for people who never saw my value. Now, I was honoring my own worth. No more shrinking. No more begging for space. No more chasing love that had always been conditional. I stood among strong, empowered women, those who had supported me, believed in me, seen me. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt at home. That's when I saw her. Sabrina, the same woman Vivian once paraded as the better fit for Ethan. She hovered at the entrance, unsure, almost ashamed. I raised an eyebrow, but she spoke first. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, waiting. I believed her, she admitted. I believed you were the problem. That you didn't belong. She looked away. Then I saw what she did to Ethan. And I realized that could have been me. I let the moment hang before I answered. You're lucky, I said finally. You got out before it was too late. She nodded, exhaling. I've heard about your success. I wanted to see it for myself. I gestured to the boutique around us, my business, my creation, my legacy. Well, I said with a smile, welcome to the little shop Vivian tried to destroy. Sabrina chuckled, shaking her head. She underestimated you. A lot of people did, I replied. Later that night, I stepped outside. The city skyline stretched above me, the same view I had stared at the night Ethan left. Back then, I had been bracing for war. Now, I had already won. Not because they suffered. Not because I tore them down. But because I rebuilt me. Vivian once said I wasn't good enough for their family. And in the end, she was right. I wasn't good enough for them. I was better.